Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows and adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So lo and behold, they have gotten their cure, but the fact of the matter is they need to handle things a little differently, because basically they need like a minute or so for the cure to actually activate, but it's also the situation of the way Cicada works, their powers won't work against them, so it's like they need a means of protecting themselves when the time comes. So basically it's them going after this device, but it turns out this device is in the hands of a criminal known as Goldfaced, and so basically Ralph and Barry end up, kind of going undercover for a little bit. And it's kind of interesting because, like, for Ralph, it's kind of like, this is my world, kind of the world of Scum. Because I even love it later when Goldface is like, Scum recognizes Scum, and like I could smell you from a mile away. I recognize a fellow Scum brother, and he was just like, kind of like, thanks. But the fact of the matter is, Barry, being who he is, he's always kind of been like, do the right thing. And especially when he saw those guns that could, hurt CCPD, also as, because it's multiple things of like, for one, it's this hero instinct. Two, he works with the CCPD as well. Plus three, Joe, his dad, is, a cop too. So it's like, yeah, I mean, once again, the main thing is like, yeah, it's innocent people will get hurt, in particular cops, but I think those other things kind of trickle down as being like byproducts of that as well, so it's just kind of an interesting thing. So Barry gave himself away because it's like, oh, you want to buy all of our supplies? That seems like kind of like a good guy thing to do, like, so Barry kind of showed his hand a little, but Ralph is like, what did I tell you? Keep your head down in this area. It's like, me, I can make things happen here. But I did like that Barry quickly came, because I was wondering, like, legitimately back in my mind, I was like, could he use Leonard Snart? I mean, because it's like, how many people know what Snart looked like? I mean, I guess he's well known enough. He was locked up and everything. Was Snart ever locked up? He was, wasn't he? I'm blanking. That's what I thought he was going to aim for, because it's like, oh, you're buddy enough with Snart to kind of know his mannerisms and just know how to handle things. But it's like, yeah, Captain Cold people probably saw his face and everything like that. So, he's a well enough known criminal, but it's like, oh, call me the chemist and everything. He'd come up with those lies. It's like, that's pretty smart of you to come up with that on the spot. But, I do like that it was kind of this interesting aspect to it where it's like Barry kind of, he's like, I should have listened to you, Ralph, like, but I kind of didn't come in here with the right mindset. And the fact of the matter is, I was so busy trying to get those guns off the streets, they were going to potentially go after cops with those. And because of that, I compromised our entire mission. This whole, like, we have to do this, like, because basically there's still like a 3D printer. I even love Goldface being like, he's like, so you want us to steal? They're like, you want to steal it from a hospital? He's like, God, no. What do you think? I'm some kind of monster? You're going to steal it from the lab before it gets to the hospital. So I don't know whether that's him just trying to be funny and stuff like that, or whether there was a part of him like, no, I'm not that terrible person. He laughs afterwards. So I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, but I think it distinguishes how much of a crappy person you are. You crappy where you do have limits to be like, at the very least, don't steal it from a hospital. We don't want to get anyone hurt. The way he's smiling makes me think otherwise, because it's like, oh yeah, those transplants going to people who very much need them. The artificial organs that device is going to make it and everything. So, but Barry blamed himself and everything. Ralph's like, no, it's not your fault. Like, he was like, Barry's like, the fact is, I should have followed your lead. The fact of the matter is, I might have to get my hands dirty in this, and that's something I have to learn. That the fact is, the ends do justify the means. That the fact is that if I want to take down Cicada, the Flash might have to get his hands dirty. And I was wondering how it was all going to play out, because it's like, yeah, you could tell it was bothering Barry. It's like, I guess for him, it's like, as long as we're not hurting anybody, stealing it, they wouldn't hurt anyone. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people on that list who could benefit from those organs that the 3D printer could make. And Ralph, being who he is like, the Flash doesn't have to get his hands dirty. It's kind of like, almost like, that's what I'm here for. I'm the one who balances, I'm kind of like, this scummy dude of the team. But when the time came, even Ralph couldn't do it, because like, he doesn't belong to that world anymore. He's a full-blown hero. There's no crossing the line for him. And like, for him, even he's like, yeah, there's just, he saw the names of all those people who are going to be on that list, the kids and stuff, and it just, kind of went in hero mode and everything. But I did like that when Barry and Ralph went in there and locked and loaded, dude. It was just kind of pretty impressive. It's like, you're not even got your powers and you're kicking ass like that. I love that. I even love, like, Ralph did his move of he's sliding and he shoots the two guys behind him, and like, Barry's like, where did that come from? He's like, I tripped. I'm like, I love it. Because I love that they aren't like the most like, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, you're kind of so used to relying on your powers, you're kind of not. It's just kind of interesting because like even when Barry was throwing the brick and, you know, Ralph's like, thanks, but, you know, I did tell you throw the brick to me. He's like, yeah, I tried to, but I ended up just hitting the dude in the face. It's like, okay. But they went like, it was kind of like from like an action movie. They were just like knocking people out. I was like, because it impressed me because I'm like, I mean, maybe Barry is decent with the firearm. I mean, I feel like, you know, I don't think with his position at, you know, CCPD that he'd be trained in how to use a gun. I don't think he would be. But I mean, to be fair, I guess there's been situations in the past where he's kind of used weapons, you know, because I'm sure he's just used to, you know, relying on his own fists and his speed and stuff. Ralph, you know, he was a detective at one point in time, so I can understand that. Plus, he also goes, man, I knew all that Red Dead was going to pay off in some shape or form. What was really interesting is when they went up against Goldfaced and he's like, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to blow your arms off. I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way. And they shot him. I'm like, okay, that's one interesting way they end it. But it's like, oh, he's called Goldfaced for a reason. It's interesting because I brought this, it was kind of in my mind. He kind of reminds me of Nate, whereas Nate kind of steals up. He golds up. But his situation is a little different because even underneath his skin, it seems like his exoskeleton is also gold. Or at the very least, I guess he can, I don't know if Nate could do that to his body, like under, like, because the way, I don't know whether he's always gold underneath, like, is it kind of like an adamantium thing of like it's just fused to his skeleton, or is it a situation of like to protect himself he golded up his, I don't know. I'm assuming it's a situation of like it's always like that, but nevertheless, and he can also regenerate his body like that, his wounds. That's pretty impressive. I think he can also kind of manipulate gold and stuff like that. I won't lie to you, when I saw the title of this episode being like Goldfaced, I was like, you don't think it's Golden Glider or something like that, do you? That's what I was kind of wondering about. Like, I thought that maybe that was like her new name or something, because we haven't seen her in a very long time. Interesting enough, if you're curious, the actress who played Golden Glider, Snart's sister, is Peyton List. Interestingly enough, she plays currently Poison Ivy in Gotham, just in case you were curious and didn't know that. I was to say that's kind of an interesting thing, but nevertheless, you know, just the DC situation. But nevertheless, but it's pretty impressive. They ended up taking the dude down. It's almost kind of like a little brutal when he got electrocuted, like the gold melted and it's coming from his eyes and everything. I was like, oh, I was like, oh, okay, he's alive, so that's good. But they did kind of learn something from this, because it's like, hey, even without our powers, we still kind of kicked ass. So even if we go up against Cicada, like, he might have the upper hand in the strength department, but the fact of the matter is, even without our powers, don't count us out type of situation. So I thought that was pretty dope. That's one side of things. Another side of things is the whole Iris situation. Iris kind of like, you know, getting like a bad review from someone being like, oh, what she does is boring and it's not exciting or whatever, and they kind of reference Spencer. It's like, Spencer, the same lady that got arrested for being a criminal because she was making terrible stuff happen, to kind of write about it. It's like, oh yeah, like, nice job comparing the two. But nevertheless, she kind of, I guess, you know, on some level, Iris wanted to prove herself, you know, as a, you know, investigator and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting because I brought up the whole like Barry and Ralph situation being kind of like an undercover cop kind of action-y aspect, and you kind of had like the whole Iris situation with Cicada. It seemed like a kind of like thriller, a crime thriller or something like that, because it's just like almost like a horror movie in certain aspects too, because it's like ultimately she ended up being trapped in the house with him, and it just seemed like kind of one of those like a horror movie with a killer or something, or like a psychological thriller to a certain extent. You get the, I might not be describing it well, but you kind of get what I'm talking about. And it's so interesting because it's like the show actually had three different aspects to it, because it had that, and then the whole like Nora and Sherlock situation dealt with more, you know, romance type of thing. But I'll get to that soon enough. But it was kind of interesting. Like, it's like, why did Iris go there by herself? I'm surprised. I mean, it's kind of interesting. It did come up, but I'm surprised Barry didn't, you know, the team didn't get mad at her doing that. But I guess it's kind of like, you know, Iris is a grown-up. She can do what she needs to do. Like, it's just kind of interesting. I mean, I guess in the long run, you know, it makes sense, you know, for her to go alone too, because it's like if too many people were there, draw too much attention. I'm surprised that doctor didn't just happen to stop by or something. I thought that might be something that potentially would happen, but yeah, her trying to, like, her faking it to be like, oh, I just happened to step in because the door was unlocked, and I'm asking about iron in the water, and I was wondering what she was going to do about the whole purse situation, and then, like, she grabbed the purse, but he was like, that wasn't there before, so. But what's interesting about that is we end up learning that Cicada does have a weakness. It seems like the wound he has from the shard is vulnerable. Like, it seems like at the very least he might have some... It is a weak spot. Like, it seems like the rest of his body, you know, is pretty... I don't know, 'cause it's hard to really judge, like, how much of Cicada it's just, like... Because it seemed like he's relatively human more often than not when it comes to... I mean, with the exception of, like, his superhuman strength. I mean, it does seem like he might kind of have, like, some defensive aspect of, like, being kind of, like, strong, you know, skin-wise. But I mean, I guess, like, if he takes enough damage, you know, from meta abilities, then it'd affect him like that, but... I guess just because that wound is kind of the sort, like, I guess it's one of that thing, I guess it's kind of like a, God, what is it, the Greek thing, I'm blanking on it, it's gonna bother the crap out of me. Achilles is what I'm trying to think of. Geez, like the whole thing of like his mom held him from the back, you know, his Achilles heel, and that was the one part of him that wasn't invincible. I think it's kind of a similar situation because the shard stabbed him there, and the moment they removed it, that part of him kind of remained human and neutral, so it doesn't have the same protection the rest of his body does, which I think is kind of a fascinating thing, which does give him a weakness in a place that they can specifically aim for to kind of take him down when they need to inject the cure into him. So what's also interesting, and sadly it's kind of heartbreaking, is like Iris, you know, trying to get away from him, ended up breaking the house, you know, him and Gracie worked on and stuff, and it's like that little toy house, and it's like that obviously means a lot to him because it's like a reminder of Gracie, and the fact is like kind of like a little bit of him, of her, that he can take with him anywhere, you know. So that's kind of actually a little sad. I'm sure that's going to piss him off even more. The thing is, now he knows Iris's face. Like, she said, we'll take you down. Granted, she did. I mean, now he knows who Iris is. Maybe he'll piece it together about who the others potentially are in that regard, but I don't know whether he will or not. We'll kind of ultimately have to wait and see in that regard, but, you know, at the very least, this now puts Iris in his crosshairs. I mean, because let's not also forget, they still don't know the fact is that the doctor is the one that's also supporting him behind all of this, too, so we'll see if that ends up being revealed. I'm assuming it's going to be, but I wonder how much more involvement it's going to take of her being involved before it ends up coming out that she's involved, you know, so. But then finally, there's also the other element in this episode. The fact is, Nora knows that Sherlock is onto her, and so she asks Eobard. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing for Eobard. It's like, you know, when you take take another man's face, you don't just, you know, get to know him across timelines. You know him across different Earths. I mean, let's not forget, he was still Wells even when he was on Earth 52. So it's kind of like, so even to that extent, like, he made sure to probably learn about every Wells, just because if he needs to be that Wells to do something, then he, you know, so Nora set up this whole situation to basically, like, she kind of almost did this, like, set a little traps in the sense of making small things happen together to make it so that Sherlock and is it Renee or is it Irene? Essentially, it seems like, especially with her last name being like Adler, essentially it's kind of like, oh, she's supposed to be the Irene. I mean, obviously he's Sherlock. He had a partner named Watson. Like, obviously he pronounces it different, but like, obviously you get the whole thing they're going for, but she's kind of like essentially Irene. But he kind of creeped her out. It's like, oh, they hit it off and everything, but then he creeped her out by, you know, doing his thing of being like, oh yeah, I know this and this and this and that about you. So what does Nora do? She calls upon his other ex-wives. And like Sherlock's like, they didn't know where I was until now. And then we find out the interesting detail that he literally married the same woman on different Earths. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like, I think that speaks volumes. I mean, I guess on some level you can look at it as being like, oh, that's kind of romantic, because it's like, hey, that's you. You know, it's like he said, like, she's the one woman for me, even, you know, even though things don't work out on this Earth. Maybe it's kind of sad that basically he just goes after the same woman just because things don't work out with her on this Earth. Oh, let me go be with her on another Earth. And now it kind of makes more sense why he also has different wives on different Earths, because he's so in love with this woman. Like, she might be a different person on every Earth, but who she is at her core is the same. So that was kind of interesting. I also love that he ended up bringing it up because it's like 4 out of 5. The moment Nora mentioned it, I'm like, why isn't the 5th one coming? And I was like, all right, she got the alimony check, didn't she? But then it was kind of like, I was like, who gave it to a speedster? But then they later on reminded me, they were like, oh yeah, Superman delivered on Earth 30. I was like, right, that was the whole thing. He gave it to Clark during the Elseworlds crossover. about that. I was like, right, I'd completely forgotten about that. And that's such an interesting thing too, because they're like, he's like, wait, you knew about it? It's like, she's like, what, you didn't? They were like, you don't think we talked to each other? He's kind of like, I was hoping that they didn't. But the fact of the matter is, they're actually kind of friends and stuff like that. They actually call, except for one of them. She's like, I don't really like to call, so I text. Also, we kind of find out like, oh, he is kind of, a romantic. The fact of the matter is, he tries to do the right thing. He tries to be thoughtful. It doesn't always work out. Like, one ended up being like definitely allergic to puppies, but for him, he tried to justify it, being like, no, I gave you all those puppies, so that you could build up, immunity essentially, so that your allergic reaction would kind of go away. And then the other girl, it's like her version. It's like, oh, like the fact of the matter is, he broke up with me by faking his death twice. Because even he, at the first one, he's like, yeah, that wasn't thoughtful. But then the others turn to her and like, actually, that last one's kind of on you, sweetie. And they're like, you got 1 month to pay us back, which is interesting because he's already kind of in debt with everyone, Team Flash at Star Labs. He's kind of in debt there too. So he's kind of screwed on that front. And what was really it's interesting too, because they're like, yeah, if you don't pay up, we're going to send a breacher after you, which is interesting because the moment I was like, oh, that's interesting, because that might be the way to kind of slide potentially, Cynthia / Gypsy back into the story. Potentially. I don't know if they're going to go through that. I mean, it might just be kind of a wink and a nod. They're like, hey, breacher, which is interesting. I wonder, are any of them from Earth 19? The fact is that one of them suggested that, so it's like maybe one of them has to be from Earth 19. I mean, to be fair, he goes across all the multiverse to track down criminals, so I mean, I'm assuming like, you probably can contact them on Earth 19 to kind of help you with your particular situation on your respective Earth, but nevertheless. And Nora actually kind of felt bad. I'm sure there's part of her that's like, oh, I'm doing this for the plan, but at the same time, it's like, oh no, like, it's also because she kind of felt bad because it's like, oh yeah, I kind of ruined things a little bit for him. But basically broke it down to him and like, you can't like treat love like a mystery that's to be solved. You got to let it happen step by step and just kind of enjoy the steps. And he makes up with Renee. I'm once again terrible with names. Makes up with her and it's like, oh, they're hitting it off. And then he finds out she's a metahuman. I guess like this might be one of the few Earth. Well, he's been married. I'm assuming all the other versions of her weren't metahumans. I mean, multiverse and everything like that. So. And now he's obsessed with like, oh, I'm a protector because she's a metahuman and Cicada might come after her. Which, man, oh man, is that super messed up when you think about that. Like, Nora probably justifies it. They're like, well, the fact of the matter is I'm distracting him, sure. But the fact of the matter is he's happy, he's doing good stuff with his time. So it kind of works out and it's still bad. It's like, but you still, I mean, I guess it works out because, I mean, that means Cicada still would have come after her eventually anyway, but it still kind of sucks that you're like toying with his heart in that regard. But like I said, she might justify it, because in her mind, that was an aspect of this episode, like I brought up earlier, the ends justify the means. For her, it's like, we're going to stop Cicada and save her dad, because she even said a line at the beginning that was like, if my dad finds out, he'll hate me, which I don't think Barry will. It'll be a tough pill to swallow, because Barry has, once again, he's like, maybe someday I could forgive Eobard, maybe I can believe that he changed, but like, Barry's not in that mindset right now, so that'd be a hard pill to swallow for him, because it's also like, not only did you do all that, the fact is you lied to it. Even after finding out about what he did to my family, you still kept it from me. So there's that. So she made it clear that she's willing to do whatever it takes to protect that secret. So we kind of see how far she's going. I mean, granted, this is like, it's like, hey, she's just distracting him a little bit, because Eobard himself is like, oh, if he was an issue, would have found a different way to take care of him. But the fact of the matter is, it's Nora, and he's trying to be like, oh, I'm a good guy, so he tries to find like a roundabout way of handling it. Eobard, I'm sure, could have found an easier solution of getting rid of Sherlock, but he chose not to. So trying to play into the whole reform thing, because once again, I still don't believe that. So it's a very interesting episode. I'm very interested to see kind of where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.